California sun hung low over the Ventura Sporting Club as Clint Eastwood pulled his pickup into the gravel lot. It was October 1973. He was 43 years old and had just wrapped a brutal month of directing and starring in High Plains Drifter. His shoulder ached from carrying the weight of both jobs, and his eyes were tired from too many late nights in the editing room. But this wasn't work. This was the one place where he could clear his head, the private shooting club where he'd been a member for 5 years. But what happened next? Nobody saw it coming, not even Clint himself. He grabbed his gun case from the truck bed, old leather, scratched and faded, same one he'd used since his Army days. He headed toward the clubhouse. The parking lot was more crowded than usual. At least a dozen vehicles were scattered around. Expensive trucks, a Cadillac, a Lincoln Continental with Texas plates. Not the typical weekend crowd. Inside the clubhouse, Clint signed the range log with the attendant, a younger man named Pete, who usually worked Saturdays. Busy today, Clint said, handing over his membership card. Pete nodded, looking a bit nervous. Yeah, Mr. Wayne is here. Brought some friends. They're using the competition range. John Wayne's here. Yes, sir. Showed up about an hour ago. They're running some kind of exhibition shoot, drawing quite a crowd. Clint felt his stomach tighten slightly. He and Wayne had never met, but he knew what the older actor thought of him. Wayne had been vocal in interviews about these new revisionist westerns and how they disrespected the genre. High Plains Drifter, with its morally ambiguous protagonist and dark themes, was exactly the kind of film Wayne hated. Lane 8 is open if you want some distance from the crowd, Pete offered. Thanks. Clint walked through the clubhouse and out to the outdoor range. He could hear voices from the competition area, laughter, the crack of gunfire, the murmur of spectators. He found Lane 8 at the far end of the standard range, away from the commotion. Set his case down, opened it. His Colt single-action Army revolver sat in its foam padding, clean, well-maintained, familiar. He'd owned it for 15 years. Practiced with it whenever he could. Not for movies. For himself. Because shooting was one of the few things that quieted his mind. Well, look what we got here. Clint looked over. 3 men were walking toward him from the competition range. Even from a distance, he recognized John Wayne immediately. 6 feet 4 inches, wearing a tan Western shirt and his trademark Stetson, that unmistakable swagger even at 66 years old. The other 2 men flanked him. One was tall and lean with a weathered face, probably in his 50s. The other was stocky with a thick mustache, maybe 40. Afternoon, Clint said calmly, turning back to his revolver. Wayne stopped a few feet away, his 2 companions standing slightly behind him. You're Clint Eastwood. Yes, sir. Thought so. Recognized you from the movies. Wayne's voice carried that distinctive cadence, but there was an edge to it. The spaghetti westerns. Clint set down his revolver and turned to face them. That's right. Wayne looked at Clint's gun case, then back at his face. So, you actually shoot? Or is that just for show? The tall man next to Wayne chuckled. Come on, Duke. You know these actor types? They've got armorers who handle the real guns. Probably never shot a live round outside of some movie set safety demonstration. Clint felt the back of his neck get warm, but he kept his voice steady. I shoot regularly. Have for years. Sure you do, the stocky one said. I'm sure you're real good at hitting your mark when the director yells action. Wayne crossed his arms. What Jerry's trying to say is that there's a difference between movie shooting and real shooting. We've been watching you make these westerns where you play these dark, brooding gunfighters. High Plains Drifter. That one where you're basically the devil. He shook his head. That's not the West I know. That's not what cowboys were about. It's just a different take on the genre, Clint said quietly. A wrong take, Wayne said, his voice hardening. You're teaching a generation that heroes don't exist, that the West was built by killers and cowards. That's not history. That's Hollywood cynicism. By now, other shooters had started to drift over from the competition range. Clint could see at least 20 people gathering, curious about the confrontation. I'm not trying to teach anyone anything, Clint said. I'm just making movies. Movies that make my films look old-fashioned, Wayne continued. Movies that say everything I stood for was a lie. You know what they're calling me now? A relic. Yesterday's cowboy. Because you and your Italian directors decided to make anti-heroes instead of heroes. The tall man stepped forward. What Duke means is that you're riding on the backs of real Western stars. Men who built this genre with honest, decent stories about good versus evil. And now you're tearing it all down. I never said, you didn't have to say it, Jerry interrupted. Your movies say it for you. All that squinting and silence, pretending to be deep. But it's just pretense, isn't it? You're not a real cowboy. You're an actor playing dress up. Wayne held up a hand, quieting his friends. Tell you what, Eastwood, you want to prove you're not just a costume and a squint. Let's settle this the old-fashioned way. A shooting competition. You and me. Let everyone here see if you can back up all that tough guy posturing on screen. The crowd had grown to at least 30 people now. Clint could see a mix of expressions. Some sympathetic, some curious, some clearly enjoying the drama. I didn't come here for a competition, Clint said, his voice low and measured. I came here to practice. Oh, I bet you did, Wayne said. Because practicing alone is easy. No pressure, no one watching. But real shooting, real competition, that takes something you've never had to show in your movies. Actual courage. Duke, maybe we should, Jerry started. No, Wayne cut him off. I'm tired of watching this kid tear down everything we built. If he wants to make westerns, if he wants to play the gunslinger, then he'd better be able to shoot like one. A woman's voice cut through the tension. John, that's enough. He's not bothering anyone. Everyone turned. A silver-haired woman in her 60s stood near the back of the crowd, wearing a shooting vest and carrying a competition rifle. She had kind but firm eyes. Stay out of this, Morin, Wayne said, though his tone softened slightly. I will not stay out of it when I see you bullying someone for making movies you don't like. This is a shooting club, not a film criticism seminar. Wayne's jaw tightened, but he kept his focus on Clint. The offer stands, Eastwood. You and me. Standard precision shooting. 25 yards, 6 shots. We'll see if you're as good as you pretend to be on screen. Clint looked at his revolver, then at the crowd, then back at Wayne. The Duke was a legend, not just as an actor, but as a shooter. He'd won fast draw competitions in the 1950s, had been shooting competitively for a decade. This wasn't just about proving himself. This was about going up against one of the best. What exactly are we shooting for? Clint asked quietly. Wayne's smile was cold. Simple. We both shoot 6 rounds at standard targets. Best grouping wins. If I win, you admit that these new westerns of yours are just cheap imitations of the real thing, that you're riding on my coattails. And if I win, then I'll admit you can shoot. How's that? The crowd was dead silent now, waiting for Clint's response. Clint thought about it for a moment. He thought about all the hours he'd spent at this range, not for movies, but because shooting was something real in a world of pretense. He thought about his father teaching him to shoot as a kid, about his time in the army, about the discipline and focus it required. He thought about how satisfying it would be to prove John Wayne wrong, but he also thought about how this could go very badly. Wayne was a champion-level shooter. Clint was good, but was he that good? All right, Clint said. But let's make it interesting. Wayne raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Not 25 yards. 50. The crowd gasped. Even Wayne looked surprised. 50 yards with a revolver? That's ridiculous, the tall man sputtered. Even Duke doesn't. I'll do it. Wayne interrupted, his competitive nature flaring. 50 yards it is. This I've got to see. This is where Story Sphere brings you the moment that changed everything. Stay with us. The range master, an older man named Frank with a clipboard and a weathered face, walked over. Gentlemen, what's going on here? Just a friendly competition, Wayne said smoothly. Eastwood and I are going to settle who's the better shot. 50 yards, 6 rounds each. Frank looked at Clint. That true? Yes, sir. Frank studied both men for a moment, then nodded. All right, but we do this proper. I'll set up fresh targets at 50 yards. Standard bullseye targets. You'll shoot in turns so everyone can see. Clean competition. No nonsense. As Frank walked downrange to set up the targets, the crowd buzzed with excitement. Clint could hear bets being made, odds being called out. Most of them favored Wayne. He was the legend, after all. Duke, are you sure about this? 50 yards is, I'm sure, Wayne said firmly. It's time someone put this kid in his place. Wayne's other friend, the tall one, turned to Clint. Last chance to back out, Eastwood. No shame in admitting you're out of your depth. Clint met his eyes. I'm good. Your funeral. Frank returned and signaled that the targets were ready. Mr. Wayne, you called the coin toss. You want to shoot first or second? I'll go first, Wayne said. Show them how it's done. Wayne walked to the firing line with the confidence of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. He pulled out his revolver, a beautiful Colt .45 with custom grips, and engraving. Championship-grade weapon. He checked it methodically, loaded 6 rounds, then stepped up to the line. The crowd went silent. This was John Wayne, about to demonstrate why he was a legend. Wayne raised his revolver, took his stance, wide, stable, professional. His arm extended smoothly. For a man of 66, his hands were remarkably steady. Bang! The first shot cracked through the air. Wayne didn't wait to see where it landed. He adjusted, fired again. Bang! A rhythm, controlled and practiced. Bang! 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 6 shots in maybe 20 seconds. Wayne lowered his revolver and stepped back, his face neutral. Frank walked downrange to check the target. The crowd waited in tense silence. When Frank reached the target, he examined it carefully, then turned around. "Ladies and gentlemen," Frank called out, his voice carrying across the range. "We have 6 shots, 5 in the bullseye, 1 just outside. 8-inch grouping. Total score, 54 out of 60. The crowd erupted in applause. That was exceptional shooting, especially at 50 yards with a revolver. Wayne accepted the praise with a modest nod, but his eyes were on Clint. "Your turn, kid." Clint walked to the firing line. His heart was pounding, but he kept his breathing steady. He checked his revolver one more time. All 6 chambers loaded. The weight felt right in his hand, familiar and solid. He could feel every pair of eyes on him. 30-plus people watching, waiting to see if the movie star could match the legend. Most of them probably expected him to fail. "This is where he chokes," someone whispered. Clint blocked it out. He focused on his breathing, just like he'd been taught. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Slow and steady. He raised the revolver, extending his arm. The stance wasn't fancy. No competition-grade positioning. Just the way he'd learned, refined through hundreds of hours of practice. He lined up the sights. The target at 50 yards looked impossibly small. He let his breath out halfway and held it. And then, everything else disappeared. The crowd. Wayne's presence. The pressure. The humiliation if he failed. All of it faded into background noise. There was only Clint, the gun, and the target. He squeezed the trigger. Bang! The revolver kicked in his hand, familiar and controlled. He didn't wait to see where the shot landed. Muscle memory took over. Breathe. Adjust. Squeeze. Bang. Again. Bang. The rhythm was hypnotic. Each shot felt right. Felt clean. Bang. 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 6 shots. The revolver clicked empty. Clint lowered it, his arm steady, his breathing controlled. The range was completely silent. Frank walked downrange to check the target. The walk seemed to take forever. Clint couldn't see the target clearly from where he stood, but he thought he'd done well. At least, he hoped he had. Frank reached the target and examined it closely. His expression was unreadable. Then he turned around, a genuine look of surprise on his weathered face. "Ladies and gentlemen," Frank called out, his voice carrying across the range. "We have 6 shots, all 6 in the bullseye. For inch grouping. Total score, 60 out of 60. Perfect score." The crowd exploded. Some cheered. Some groaned as money changed hands. Morin, the woman who defended Clint earlier, was clapping enthusiastically. But Clint's eyes were on John Wayne. The Duke's face had gone from confident to shocked. His mouth was slightly open, his eyes fixed on the target in Frank's hands. For the first time in the encounter, Wayne seemed at a loss for words. As Frank brought both targets back for comparison, the crowd surged forward. Wayne's target showed excellent shooting, 5 in the bullseye, 1 just outside, spread over 8 inches. Clint's target showed all 6 holes clustered in the center, so close together they nearly overlapped. That's impossible," Jerry stammered. "Nobody shoots perfect at 50 yards with a revolver." "Apparently, somebody does," Morin said dryly. Frank handed Clint his target. "Son, that's some of the finest shooting I've seen in 40 years of running this range. Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" Clint accepted the target with a modest nod. "Army, mostly. Then just practice. Lots of practice." Wayne finally found his voice. "You got lucky. That's all. Beginner's luck." Clint turned to him slowly. "You think so? Has to be." "Nobody." Wayne stopped himself, realizing how it sounded. "Nobody what?" Clint asked, his voice still calm, but carrying an edge now. "Nobody who makes the kind of westerns you don't like could possibly be a real shooter? Nobody who plays anti-heroes could have actual skill." Wayne's face flushed red. "Here's the thing, Mr. Wayne," Clint continued, stepping closer. "I never claimed my movies were better than yours. I never said the old westerns were wrong. I just wanted to tell different stories. That's all. But you decided that because I make films you don't like, I must be a fraud. You judged me before I ever picked up this gun. The crowd had gone quiet again, watching this reversal with rapt attention. You called me out in front of all these people, Clint said. You wanted to prove I was just a costume and a squint. But I'm not. I'm someone who's been shooting since I was a kid. Someone who respects the craft, both the craft of shooting and the craft of making westerns. I don't have to make movies like yours for them to be valid. And you don't have to like my movies for me to be a real shooter. Wayne's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Now, Clint said, his voice dropping back to its usual quiet tone. I believe we had an agreement. You said if I won, you'd admit I can shoot. I'm waiting. Wayne looked around at the crowd. Many were watching him with expressions ranging from amusement to disappointment. He seemed to age 10 years in that moment. You can shoot, Wayne said quietly. Didn't catch that. I said you can shoot. Wayne repeated louder, his voice rough. That was exceptional shooting. Better than mine. Clint nodded once. Thank you, Duke. He turned to gather his things, ready to be done with this whole situation. But before he could move, a new voice joined the conversation. Duke, you old fool. Everyone turned to see another older man walking over from the clubhouse. He was in his 70s, distinguished looking, with white hair and a military bearing. His jacket indicated he was some kind of range official. Colonel Patterson, Frank said with surprise. Didn't know you were here today. I was in my office doing paperwork, Colonel Patterson said, his eyes moving between Wayne and Clint. Heard the commotion and came out to see what was happening. He looked at the targets Frank was still holding. May I? Frank handed them over. Patterson examined both carefully, then looked at Clint with recognition dawning in his eyes. You're Clint Eastwood, the actor. Yes, sir. And before that, you were stationed at Fort Ord Army. 1951 to 1953. Swimming instructor. Clint was surprised. That's right. How did you know? Patterson smiled. Because I was there. I was a captain then, running some of the marksmanship training programs. You placed third in the All-Army Pistol Championship in 1952, didn't you? Yes, sir. Third place, out of 2,000 competitors, Patterson added. And you would have placed higher if you hadn't been using standard-issue equipment while everyone else had custom rigs. The crowd was murmuring again, but the tone had completely changed. These weren't mocking whispers. They were impressed. Jerry pushed up his thick mustache. Wait, so you're telling us this guy is actually a championship-level shooter? Was, Clint corrected. That was over 20 years ago. Patterson laughed. Was? Son, if that's you, Rusty, I'd hate to see you in peak form. He turned to Wayne. Duke, did you know any of this before you challenged him? Wayne had the decency to look ashamed now. No, sir. Let me guess. You saw his movies, didn't like the direction they took the Western genre, and assumed he was just another Hollywood actor playing dress-up. Wayne's silence was answer enough. Well, let this be a lesson, Patterson said sternly. Never assume someone's capabilities based on their current profession or the art they make. Mr. Eastwood here is the real deal. Always has been. The tall man spoke up, his earlier arrogance completely gone. Mr. Eastwood, I owe you more than just an acknowledgement. That was really out of line, what Duke said. What we all said. Clint considered them for a moment. Wayne looked genuinely remorseful now, his ego properly deflated. Tell you what, Clint said. How about instead of apologies, we all shoot together? I could use some pointers on fast draw technique. I'm sure Mr. Wayne knows methods I've never learned. Wayne blinked in surprise. You want to shoot with me? After what I said. Why not? We're all here because we love shooting, right? Clint extended his hand. Clean slate. Wayne stared at the offered hand for a moment. Then, slowly, he took it, shaking firmly. Clean slate. And I was wrong about you, Eastwood. That was some of the best shooting I've ever seen. Maybe the best. Thank you, sir. And for what it's worth, I grew up watching your movies. True Grit is one of my favorites. You're the reason I wanted to make westerns in the first place. Wayne's eyes widened slightly. You mean that? I do. I'm not trying to replace what you built. I'm trying to add to it. Show different sides of the same story. For a moment, something shifted in Wayne's expression. The defensive anger faded, replaced by something like understanding. Maybe I've been looking at it wrong, Wayne said quietly. Maybe there's room for both kinds of westerns. As the crowd began to disperse, many people came up to shake Clint's hand or ask about his technique. Frank offered him honorary lifetime membership. Morin invited him to join the club's competition team. But it was Colonel Patterson's words that stuck with Clint as he packed up his gear later that afternoon. "You know, son," the colonel had said quietly, "what you did today wasn't just about proving you could shoot. It was about maintaining dignity in the face of unfair criticism. You didn't get angry. You didn't lash out. You just quietly demonstrated your competence and let the results speak for themselves. And then, and this is the important part, you offered friendship instead of rubbing his face in it. That's the mark of a true professional." As Clint drove home that evening, the California sun setting behind the hills, he thought about Patterson's words. He thought about Wayne, and how easy it would have been to stay angry, to humiliate the older actor further, to make him pay for the disrespect. But what would that have accomplished? The target from his perfect score sat on the passenger seat, a reminder that sometimes the best response to judgment isn't anger or argument. It's simply being excellent at what you do, and then offering grace. His phone was ringing when he got home. It was Sergio Leone. "Clint, I heard the most incredible story from a friend in California. Something about you and John Wayne at a shooting range." Clint smiled. "News travels fast. Is it true? Did you really shoot a perfect score to beat John Wayne?" "Something like that." Leone laughed, that booming Italian laugh. "This is perfect. Absolutely perfect. You know what this means." "What's that?" "It means the two biggest names in Westerns are no longer enemies. It means maybe, just maybe, people will stop seeing your films and his films as opposites. Maybe they'll see them as two parts of the same tradition." After they hung up, Clint sat on his porch with a beer, watching the stars come out. The phone rang again. This time, it was a reporter from Variety who'd somehow already heard about the incident. "Mr. Eastwood, is it true you outshot John Wayne at the Ventura Sporting Club?" "We had a friendly competition," Clint replied carefully. "I got lucky." "Lucky? Our source says you shot a perfect score at 50 yards. The circumstances were favorable. Still, it must feel good to prove your critics wrong." Clint thought about that. Honestly, the best part wasn't the shooting. It was the conversation afterward. Mr. Wayne and I had a chance to talk about Westerns, about different approaches to the genre. I think we both learned something. "That's very diplomatic of you." After that call, Clint unplugged the phone. He had a feeling it was going to be ringing a lot over the next few days. He was right. By Monday morning, the story had spread through Hollywood. His agent called, thrilled about the publicity. Studios called, eager to capitalize on the story. Magazine editors called, wanting exclusive interviews. But the call that mattered most came on Tuesday morning, from John Wayne himself. "Eastwood, this is John Wayne. Mr. Wayne, good to hear from you. Listen, I wanted to call personally to apologize properly, without the crowd around. What I said on Saturday, about your movies, about you being a fraud, that was out of line. I appreciate that. I've been thinking about what you said, about adding to the tradition instead of replacing it, about different sides of the same story." Wayne paused. "I still don't love these dark westerns of yours. I probably never will. But I was wrong to say they're not valid. Wrong to say you're not a real cowboy. We can disagree about movies and still respect each other," Clint said. "That's what I'm learning. Look, I've got a proposition for you. I'm listening. I'm doing a film next year. The Shouldest. It's about an old gunfighter dying of cancer. Last film I'll probably ever make." Wayne's voice was quieter now. "The script has a scene where a young gunslinger challenges the old-timer. The writer wants to cast some nobody, but I was thinking, what if it was you?" Clint was genuinely surprised. "You want me in your movie?" "I want the best shooter in Hollywood in my movie. That happens to be you. And I think it would say something. The Old West meeting the New West, with respect instead of hostility." "I'd be honored, Mr. Wayne." "Duke. Call me Duke." They talked for another 20 minutes about the script, about Westerns, about the changing industry. When they hung up, Clint felt something had fundamentally shifted. The Shouldest role didn't end up happening. Scheduling conflicts and Wayne's declining health intervened. But the friendship that began that day lasted until Wayne's death in 1979. Over the following months, Clint returned to the Ventura Sporting Club regularly. Duke came when his health allowed, and they shot together. Not competing, just two men who loved the craft, sharing techniques, telling stories. Duke taught Clint the fast draw methods he'd learned in the 1950s. Clint showed Duke some of the precision techniques he'd picked up in the Army. They became not rivals, but colleagues. Friends. Even the shooting community noticed. The story of their confrontation and subsequent friendship became legendary in sporting circles. It changed the culture at Ventura, made it less about ego and more about mutual respect. Jerry and Morin and Tom, the tall man whose name had finally come out, all became part of their regular shooting group. The initial hostility transformed into genuine camaraderie. You know what the worst part was? Duke admitted one day, months after their first meeting. Deep down, I think I was jealous. Here you were, younger, making successful films, getting critical praise. And I couldn't handle that you might also be a better shooter than me. You're one of the best shooters I've ever seen, Duke, Clint said. That 54 out of 60 at 50 yards, that's championship-level shooting. Maybe, but you got 60 out of 60. Perfect. I've been chasing that perfect score for 20 years, and you walked up and did it on the first try. I got lucky. No, Duke said firmly. You earned it. And I should have recognized that from the start, instead of letting my ego get in the way. The incident had an unexpected effect on both their careers. Directors and producers saw that the two biggest names in Westerns could coexist, could respect each other despite different approaches. It opened doors for more diverse Western storytelling. Critics noted the change, too. Articles appeared discussing how the Duke Wayne traditional Western and the Eastwood revisionist Western weren't opposing forces, but complementary visions of the same American mythology. Years later, when he'd become not just a star but a respected director, a journalist asked Clint about his relationship with John Wayne. There's a story about you two at a shooting range, the journalist said. Is it true? Clint smiled. Which version have you heard? The one where John Wayne challenged you to a shooting competition and you beat him with a perfect score. Something like that happened. What's the real story? The real story is that Duke and I started off on the wrong foot. We had different ideas about what Westerns should be, but we found common ground through respect for the craft, both filmmaking and shooting. That's it. Seems like there's more to it. Maybe, but the details aren't as important as the lesson, which is that you can disagree with someone about art, about vision, about approach, and still respect them as a person and a craftsman. Duke taught me that, and I hope I taught him something, too. The journalist scribbled notes. He spoke highly of you before he died. Called you the best natural shooter I ever saw. Clint felt a tightness in his chest. Duke had been gone 4 years now. Cancer, just like in the shouldest. He was generous with his praise. He also said you taught him that Westerns could evolve without betraying their roots. We taught each other a lot of things. After the interview, Clint drove out to the Ventura Sporting Club. The place had changed over the years. New buildings, updated equipment. But Lane 8 was still there, still his preferred spot when he wanted solitude. Colonel Patterson had passed away, but they'd named the main competition hall after him. Frank had retired, but he still came by on weekends to watch the young shooters train. As Clint set up at Lane 8, he thought about that day in 1973, how a confrontation born from artistic disagreement had transformed into genuine friendship, how Duke's challenge had forced him to prove himself, and how that proof had opened Duke's mind. The target from that day, the perfect score that had shocked everyone, hung framed in his home office. Not as a trophy, as a reminder that excellence speaks louder than argument, that grace is stronger than revenge, that the best way to change someone's mind isn't through debate, but through demonstration. An old Cadillac pulled into the parking lot, and Clint smiled. Jerry, now in his 70s, but still shooting regularly. Thought I'd find you here, Jerry called out, walking over with his gear. Where else would I be on a Saturday? They sat up side by side, falling into the comfortable rhythm of old friends. Loading, aiming, firing, reloading. The meditation of the shooting range. This was one of the best ones. This has been Story Sphere. Until next time.